What is happening, everybody? Welcome to the TACBox podcast. We're in episode 41. We got the big 40 out of the way. We're on the way to 50.
Last
How you
one of
doing, Dale?
25. I'm
That's
great.
true too.
The
That's true. It's
last
the
one for 25.
last one. And I'm gonna put this out here right away. So we put together this everybody does these year-end review things. And like our year-end review when we do all this is like, well, I kind of put one together for the TACBox podcast. And it's not very long, but it's kind of funny. And it's like, we collaborated with it and got like our most used word of 2025 during our podcast was breed. So then it takes a ton of it just clips together every time we said breed and put it in this video. And then the thing that we did the most in our podcast in 2025 was laugh. So there's a ton of clips of us laughing, and it's just like that. Yeah.
Here we go.
But it kind of makes me like sit back and look on it, and it's like, so if one of the most things we did during our podcast was laugh, I would assume our listeners were getting a kick out of it too. And maybe that makes the podcast engaging and not so dry and boring like a lot of podcasts are, but actually gets the listeners engaged and having a good time, which is a huge priority for us, right?
Absolutely. I mean, because you can deal with anything, good or bad, especially bad, if you can laugh about it, and the worse it is, laugh harder about it. And, it doesn't make it going away, but somehow makes it a little more tolerable,
Yeah. Oh, with that said, Happy New Year, everybody. This is the last podcast of 2025. Hey, we're recording on Tuesday like we always do. We're committed. We just might be recording earlier in the morning today because we got things going on this afternoon, and that's fine.
We're shopping. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad I'm not doing that, but I have something just as bad that I have to do with picking people up from the airport and all that. The family stuff going on. Yeah, exactly. So in this episode today, there's been a lot of things going around that you're seeing on Facebook and in your news feeds lately about other countries and regulations and legislation with not only dog breeders, but breeds in general, and how things, countries are outlawing and banning certain breeds, certain aspects of breeds, and how this really affects breeders. So we thought this would be a good topic to talk about today, right?
Absolutely, because I think we all kind of feel like that's a them thing, not a me thing. And we all tend to kind of look at things like, well, that doesn't affect me. So if it doesn't affect me, it's not my problem, and I only care just a little bit. And then we don't really seem to get too nutted up about it until it begins to affect us. And then all of a sudden go like, whoa, how did this happen? And that's one thing about, I think that probably I see a lot of this online, is the other day we trapped the little feral dog that got dumped, and on there, and we got him into rescue and got all that stuff. And so now my feed is filled with videos of trapping feral animals. I have a lot of that going on these days. And so which automatically goes into rescue, which then goes into animal rights. And you kind of go, I'm not pro-choice animal abuse, but these people that are promoting this have a bigger agenda, and they consider me to be part of their problem. Even though they'll take, it's like, okay, fine, but the breeders are the root of all evil. And if people for 1 minute think that they're not if they don't have a bullseye and a target, that's naive. That's very naive.
Hey, everybody. Sorry for the interruption, but I just need to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast network, wherever you're listening to this right now. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit a thumbs up button. Make sure you show us that you like this content, that we're doing good. Help us grow. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Now back to the show. Well, and a lot of times it starts in other countries, right? And then, America has to decide, do we adopt that same type of thing, or what is our stance on that? And then you got a bunch of different groups, AKC being one of them, is like, what's our stance? So, like, do you have an example of one of the articles of a country and a breed that they're working on talking about this?
Well, thank you. Yes, I do. Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. Wonderful breed. Old breed. Healthy breed. they, like anything else, they have their issues, but they have some dedicated people working hard on them. We know what their issues are. We're making them better. They're living longer. They're doing better. But there's like, was it Norway or Finland? I think it
Finland
was,
rings a bell for some
I
reason.
think it's Finland. They banned them altogether. Said, nope, can't breed these together. You're going to have, and they have some because they're just too unhealthy. And then you start hearing about them like wanting to ban all brachycephalic dogs, which would be like Chin, English Toys, Brussels Griffons, Pekingese, all bulldogs, because they're just not healthy enough. And what's happening is you have these people who aren't really involved in this, and they're like going, yeah, well, this is animal abuse, I'm opposed to it, without ever bother to learn my raising Japanese Chin is not animal abuse to you, but it is to them. And that's, so you have to really be aware of when we start talking about legislation and where that goes, because it's like going, well, I don't really want to align myself with this, where I'm somewhere in the middle, but you need to be aware that these people vehemently oppose you, and they're working really hard to do away with us, and that's an ever-growing thing.
How does, like, through history, have you seen what happens? So if Finland ends up banning breeding Cavalier King Charles, how does that affect surrounding countries? And like, then what do we see with how it affects us in America? Because I know one of the big things is, as breeders of dogs, we're not very popular in a lot of people's eyes, especially in legislation and that type, because we're animal abusers, and
In their
nothing
mind.
comes good out of dog breeders in
No,
legislature and anything like that. They have such a negative opinion on people who breed dogs. So like, how have you seen, just how does that affect do other countries get on board because it just takes one to start,
it
or, you know?
absolutely. It just takes and you have to be, it's kind of like that proverbial slippery slope where you start at one point with the goal of getting it to this other, but first you get your foot in your door. So one thing that has bled from overseas to here is cropping and docking bans. Our AKC standards were breeds, Dobermans were cropped. Some breeds were optional, like Brussels Griffons or Boston Terriers. Then, but all of a sudden now we see dogs that we showed cropped and docked, but we can't enforce that now. But yet, if we take one of our dogs to one of those FCI countries where they've got the ban, we're not allowed to show it. And probably it would be about as popular as wearing a fur coat at a Hollywood premiere. You're probably going to get some red paint thrown on you. It's like that has gone from being an industry standard to to being like totally not cool at all. And the cropping and docking was not just for cosmetic stuff. There are actual purposes for it. Like all the years we had cockers. Well, cockers grow a big old long tail, and there's a lot of hair on it, and it not particularly handy to keep the doo-doo off of it when they go to the bathroom. Not, the kind of tail that um, tends to bleed a lot if they bang it into stuff. And I mean, it was a breed that they found to be easier to work with and keep if they were the dock tail. But now overseas, totally not. Here you have the option. We still have the option. And that's one thing we kind of owe a debt of gratitude to AKC, because they have fought for us to have the right for you to be able to do it. And you know what the difference between someone who breeds golden doodles or Japanese Chin or any other breed is in the eyes of the law? None. A breeder is a breeder. It doesn't matter what so when we go on and we're like vehemently opposed to other parts of our bigger sphere, the same rights that give that guy the right to breed golden doodles that's protecting my rights to have my dogs too, because the legislation isn't breed specific, and it doesn't cut out the preservation breeders. We're all bad in their book. Some are just badder than others, but they're all bad. And then they're going to turn around. Here's a thing came up on my feed today. Is that upside down? Yeah. This is a training collar. It's called a pinch collar. for large breeds. We wouldn't use it for our breeds, but there are breeds that, like I had a bull mastiff puppy. In order for Jane to walk the bull mastiff puppy, we had to have, she had to, well, we were puppies. She had to train her with the pinch collar because the dog weighed as much as she did, and if she didn't have some kind of control, that dog would take her for a mighty, there'd be no controlling that. And so using that collar while we were training her, she could correct it, keep it under control, safely handle the dog and keep the dog. But now that would be considered, that should be banned. That's a torture device. It's not a torture device. It's a training thing to be able to handle an animal safely. And I mean, but the lines get blurred, and then we see stuff like that on your Facebook come up, and all of a sudden, this is where it's going.
Well, and people like see things like that and they really freak out. And I mean, it can get people. It seems like you have two types of people. It's like the people that see that and it's like, oh my God, the world is ending, and I need to make a big deal on the internet because they're thinking about banning these training devices. And then you have the other side of people like, it doesn't affect me because I don't have a breed like that. But really, it could affect everybody in certain scenarios. But what do you so? Back to the Finland thing. So if they banned the breeding of King Charles, or is it something that's being
Absolutely.
talked about? Okay.
They won't register them. I don't know what the penalty is if you get caught doing it. They don't. There's
So
classes at shows
can
or
people own them?
now. That's a good question. I don't know. We'll have
Because
to
then
do maybe.
because then it kind of goes to like, well, being in America, we can breed them. Finland cannot breed them, but can they own them? Does that make the market increase because they can't breed them now? But if they still want them and to own them, they got to get them from somewhere. So that kind of could be a scenario. Like, does that pop up? But all these countries banning things, how does that affect legislation in America? Does America see this and like, oh, maybe we should do this? Or are we really firm on like land of the free? We're not going to do any of that and put these laws in place.
There used to be, historically speaking, I mean, where we had like certain politics that were some were more favoring farmers, ranchers, breeders, kind of had that, you had the hunting, fishing, farming, that demographic of people that made their living off of that. The same people that would enjoy going to a rodeo or watching a horse race or all of that, you know, and there was that. I don't think that's really not the way it is anymore. You can see that legislation because it's feel good stuff. I see homes that people have children in that would get you reported if you had a dog in them. Now, you can have your kids in this filthy environment, or your elderly parents that are, living with you or whatever, and no one's going to say a thing. But by gosh, if you were to have like 4 dogs in there, man, they would come, they would cuff you, you'd be in the back of a squad car, they'd haul it off. And because people have a higher tolerance to inhumane treatment of other people than they do over inhumane treatment of an animal. I saw on Facebook someone had gotten turned on the East Coast, had gotten turned in because they had older horses that they had to feed a certain way because they had choke and all that. And I mean, these were like pretty old horses. And one of the neighbors turned them into animal control because they had them tied to a fence too long.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and it's like, really? You have nothing going on in your life but to set a timer to see how long someone's taking to feed their horses or whatever. And of course, and I think because we indulge these anonymous complaints and it's scandalous and it sells tickets, we get that all the time. I do not share or comment on when people have bad things happen with their dogs or someone gets in a bad situation. Man, we're a vicious bunch of cannibals. We go after our own bad, and we do the animal rights groups work for them with such glee, and I mean, other than it's like, okay, well, this person's in a bad situation. That's sad. That's bad. What can we do to prevent that? How can we help the people in that situation? How can we it's not the norm. Super rare, not, I mean, that kind of a thing. It's like a rare thing that now we're being, just looking at those animal rights stuff that gets posted on their fundraising stuff and the pictures they use. Some of those pictures are from like the 90s. You
Yeah.
know, like, wow, I mean, this is a lot of solution looking for very little problem
Well, it's
because
one of those things like they find one. Is there bad people out there that abuse animals? Sure, 100%. There's bad people out there that abuse humans, but like they find that one thing and then they take it and run with it, and that's their advertising campaign for the next 50 years. And everybody's that bad. If you breed dogs, you're this big animal abuser. And look at these poor dogs that are sick that we found in 1990, and like it it's all the narrative that people can paint, and we're in such a world now where it's like all it takes is one person's feelings and opinion to be like, oh well, that's really sad, and now everybody needs to think it's sad because I think it's sad, and everybody has to listen to that because everybody's feelings matter. Like, something that kind of pops into my mind with all of it would be then, so if we're talking about dogs and maybe they're not healthy, or maybe we're looked at as breeders that we're animal abusers, air quotes. If you're not watching, I'm using my fingers to make those air quotes because we're not animal abusers, but that's the appearance that we have to all the legislature and animal rights people. So then it kind of just pops into my head, but like, what about horses? So like when you watch horse racing, like they're whipping them to get them to go faster. And then it's like this. I'm not super versed on horses, but I know the crap that they put in their mouth can't feel the best. So it's like, how do they appear and look at that and like, where's the difference between dogs and horses in scenarios like that?
all right, so legislatively speaking, um, I know when at one point in time we were involved with legislation in the state that we lived in, animals that were in the food chain kind of fell in one category. Animals that were companion animals fell in another. Horses fell in between because there was actually their farm animal, they're a service animal, lots of pets. And so at one point in time, and this has been some years ago, they managed because they passed a nationwide horse slaughter ban because horses were, I mean, horse lives a long time. You can get 30 years out of a horse if they live a long time. And old horses, much like old people, they take a lot of work and a lot of expense, and they don't look so good. So people would, after and there's really not a lot of birth control with horses. I mean, if you have a stallion around and mares, you're probably having foals, and so they banned the slaughter. So they would have in order, and that was used for product. That was an end result for those animals that were no longer being used. That people turned around, couldn't differentiate their pet animals for these other animals. They couldn't. They're doing legislation, and they're trying to appeal to you as like, that little Japanese chin that's laying on your lap. That's a dog, just like this other dog that da 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 da. No, it is different circumstances entirely. And so, but once that slaughter ban went into effect, well, then now we have that really killed the horse industry in a lot of ways. A lot of the big ranches like folded up. I mean, you drive through Texas, Oklahoma, and go down the I-35 corridor, and you'll see lots of what used to be mega big ranches. So, because there had to be somewhere for those horses, the ones that weren't being raced, weren't being whatever, or being used for work to go. And now there isn't. And so, I mean, so there's some where they transport some of them to Mexico, blah, blah, blah. Uh, and they do lots of raising money. They'll say, oh, they've got these horses in the kill pen, and they do a lot of raising money. That's the big thing that I think that the dog people are uber naive to, and really maybe the public uber naive to, is the huge infrastructure of fundraising that is with the animal rights industry. Because, yes, they are an industry. They're a movement and an industry. They're generating tons of money. They're getting donations, they're tax-free, they're this, they're that. These CEOs from these corporations of these nonprofit, air quotes, industries are mighty impressive. And they're right now they have all of this infrastructure in placing dogs. You see a lot of dogs, like, oh, I got my dog from rescue, this and this. Did you get a rescue? You should try to find a rescue. Well, there's not a ton of purebred, small, cute little dogs floating around in rescue. So they're generating this, well, I mean, how many of your friends have a rescue? And whenever you meet them, within the first 10 minutes, they tell you, my dog's a rescue.
Oh yeah, because it's like you meet somebody and you hang out with somebody say per se, and it's like you meet their dog for the first time. Well, naturally you ask questions. Well, what kind of dog is this? Like blah blah blah, and it's like, oh, I don't know. It's a mixed breed that I got from I rescued it. Yeah, of course it comes up, and it's a proud point of I
It's a
rescued
proud
it.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's like I wonder. I always want to go. How about your kids? Did you find them too? Were they rescues or Well, my dogs were planned. I knew when I was getting them. I knew what I wanted. I knew how to take care of. I mean, does that make me a bad person because I didn't go and do a rescue? But
rescue a
in
kid.
actual, yeah, rescue kids. There you go. But in reality, a lot of their rescues are not rescues. A lot of their rescues are rescue purchases. And these rescues are getting tens of thousands of dollars. There was one Cavalier breeder, and this was some years ago, that sold out their Cavaliers, and they were going to sell them out to commercial breeders and da 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 da. And a rescue turned around and raised over $500,000 to rescue these dogs. I mean, that's just the truth. That happened.
And you didn't even rescue them. You just bought them
They turned around
from
and
a
they sold
breeder.
them. Yeah, they bought them. They bought them from a breeder. They bought them from a breeder, and they auctioned off. They auctioned off for a breeder to rescue. So whenever you're talking about that kind of money, and so what happens is these rescues just like breeders, some super good, some not as good, a lot in the middle, but they get the infrastructure going where they are supplying because they have foster homes, they have demand, they have people wanting these dogs, they have sponsors, they have all of this stuff, all this infrastructure going. So they got to feed the beast. We got to keep finding dogs. And they're not wanting the dogs that like we get dumped on our road. Those are actually rescues. Pick
Well,
those
and those
little
take
main.
work on their end. They have to care for them
Yeah,
and work and get them fixed up to where they can send them out. And then they know, oh, this feral dog is going to be really hard to place. We're going to be sitting on this a while, which costs money. It costs
costs
all
money.
this. And
Liability.
that's
Yeah,
where the
that's
air quotes
rescue.
again, the euthanization rescues come in hand is this like, we can't place this dog and we don't want to sit on it and actually work on it. So, I mean, is that any better than a breeder?
You choose. I mean, it's like
That's an opinion you got to
there you
make,
go. I mean, so what happens is when we're now looking for dogs to fuel the demand for the rescue. I can't tell you how many times I get like, I want to go ahead and rescue. I want to rescue a dog. Do you have like a retired dog? Well, it's like, for starters, my dogs don't work. I don't give them a 1099 at the end of the year. They're not going on. So, I mean, so you have a retired dog, like they never did much to start with. I mean, they're not. And then, it's like those dogs are not rescues. That's just a rehome. That's from one home to another home. Maybe a change home with a different purpose. Maybe this was going to be a show home. Maybe this is a companion home. But it's not, there's no rescuing involved in that. Unless they were on a sinking ship and you swam out and got them or pulled them from a burning house, that was just a rehome. But we brand it as rescue, and there can be some money made on the in between. And I actually got a Facebook message where someone like wanting to they said they wanted to rescue a chin and that they had actually bought their last one as an adult out of her life of slavery. I'm like, slavery? No one's ever made a chin do anything it didn't want to do, but
and they're not
it's
going to
just,
let you do anything they don't want to do. Like
no,
the chin
exactly.
owns you. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. But it's just it's a whole mindset. And I think it's important as breeders that we call it out, we identify it, we don't support it, we don't go, well, it doesn't involve me. So if they're banging on them, it's not me. Here's some wood to go throw on your fire to burn them alive, because everyone gets a turn in the hot seat. When we turn around and when we start getting breeder release dogs that are being rehomed, when we start allowing them to become rescues, problem. When we start differentiating our rights, saying, well, I'm a preservation breeder, I'm a good breeder, I go to church, I'm the good deal, I'm the good person, and these people are not, problem. Because all of that stuff is a foothold for those people who oppose the whole industry to use the people who are in it to take out the very thing that they belong to. Super common.
Yeah, and I mean another thing common that I see or hear a lot is, the breeders that breed purebred dogs. We have this, and I'm just going to say we because I breed purebred dogs, so I'm going to lump myself into this. But we have this mindset. I don't have this particular mindset, but purebred dog breeders seem to have the mindset of anybody that's not breeding a purebred is a backyard breeder or a bad breeder or anything like that. And so then we separate ourselves from these people, and I don't know if that's beneficial long term for trying to fight legislation or trying to fight anything, because there are really good breeders out there that breed doodles, right? That
Sure.
can be
Sure.
successful and breed healthy dogs that do it the right way. They're not backyard breeders, things like that. There's a lot of that mindset, I think, out there of like, well, because I breed purebred dogs, I'm so much better than everybody else, and this doesn't affect me in any sort of way. I think
I
we have
think
to
that's
open up the book a
naive.
little bit, right? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's naive. I think that there's like, I think that there's people that have, raising other things for other reasons that might not be your reasons, and they may not be relevant to you. But I think that the whole idea of you do you, I'll do me, you know, but never stop to think that the same kennel license that I have to get is the same kennel license as someone who's either raising hybrid dogs or doing performance dogs or hunting dogs or whatever. It doesn't matter. We don't differentiate it legally. You either have a breeder license, a kennel license, you're counting the number of animals you have to qualify for it, and these are the rules, and that's that. And it's kind of like, I'm a good driver. I might have a special driver's license. I only, we only, sing hymns or whatever. We're not like those, I you are what you are. And it's like, you differentiate yourself if you want, but legally it is what it is. And when we go ahead and start turning each other and trying to promote this negativity against our own industry, that's really a means to an end, for us all.
Right. And I don't feel like when we're talking legislature and people trying to change things, like they're not coming after the doodle breeders or the just random dog breeders. Like they're not looking at it as different classifications of, oh, you breed purebred dogs, you're exempt. We're not coming after you. We're coming after the other people. So when we in our minds separate us from different types of breeders, like that, like you said, that's just being naive because we have the same target on our back as purebred breeders as any other dog breeder has out there. We're dog breeders, and that's just how we're classified.
Exactly. Exactly.
So like what can we do as dog breeders? Can we get involved in our legislation? Do we need to try to get involved at a local level? How do we I mean, other than just continuing to breed dogs the correct way and the right way, we also have to get out there and make it known like we're breeding healthy dogs. We're doing things right.
Right. Because I think that honestly what the term needs to be is like an ethical breeder. And an ethical breeder takes care of their animals, does a good job with them, takes care of their people, their customers, does a good job with them. Anybody that is successful and has repeat people and has generational success, probably a pretty ethical breeder, because if you don't do it well, there. I think we see a lot of hoarding referred to as puppy mills, and that's not hoarding is not puppy mill. Is this a manufactured term for a breeder who is not doing things to substandard terms? Puppy mill is illegal in any state. Abuse is already illegal in every state. There is really no further need for more legislation. We have like legislation in every state regarding it. It's kind of impressive to me how people, as we as Americans, we can go ahead and we can defend our rights to have an AK. You know, I live in an apartment, but I need a machine gun. Like, okay, that's in your Second Amendment rights, but yet we're going to turn around and have come down harder on people who want to raise companion animals or whatever. You know, it's like that's a more easily picked on group, and people tend to just like be under the wire because we don't want to draw. I think that perhaps there's safety in our groups. So, like our kennel clubs need to promote, responsible stuff and keep an eye on legislative stuff and work with that. There's a couple of really good groups. The Calvary group is a really good one. I've been a member for many years. They deal with nationwide animal legislation and how they're cracking down on people, unfairly. And, so I think that keeping that involvement, keeping your mind open to, and also like just kind of like knowing what the laws are and where you need to be and where you are. Because I don't care if you're a wonderful preservation breeder and you're so ethical and all that. If you have more dogs than you're zoned for, you're breaking the law. you know, you may be breeder of merit, you may have got, all of this, that's what lovely. But if you're outside the law, what you're legally allowed to do in your municipality, they can take your dogs. They can arrest you. They can put your dogs into rescue, and you will be referred to as a puppy mill. You know, I mean, because you are breaking the rules, as ethical as you might be. So I think it's a really good thing to have to know what the rules are and where you're playing within them.
Well, and I think sometimes we're so concerned as humans or Americans of like, I want to live where there's no rules. I want to be free, freedom of this, freedom of that. We talk freedom on everything. And, just to kind of piggyback, like the gun laws versus dog laws is like, well, the gun laws always got and I'm pro gun, but the gun laws always have the fallback on, well, it's in the amendment. So how do we even fight anything with that? It's like, well, the dogs aren't in the amendment anywhere. So it's like, it's easier to, oh, we can win, if we're anti dogs or, we can fight that battle easier because there's nothing in the amendment saying that everybody's allowed to have dogs there's no classifications. But one of the things that like kind of just popped into my mind, again, and this is how I started this conversation is Americans and we think of everything as we're free and we have all this choice and this options and we should be able to be whatever we want. So naturally, this happened during COVID. A lot of people moved to South Dakota because South Dakota had the mindset of we're the open state. We're not going to shut down. You can move here and everything's open and you got the freedom and all the
Sure.
things. And so a lot of people moved here because nobody wants guardrails, nobody wants borders. But when I think about dog breeding and what I know about dog breeding, I think sometimes those borders and guardrails are nice and they could be leveraged. So, in South Dakota, do whatever the hell you want, breed your dogs, but like there's no legislation or regulation with it. Other states, you have to have a license if you have so many dogs, and then you have annual or biannual kennel inspections. We look at that type of stuff as, well, you're taking away my freedom. I don't want to be there. I don't want to have a dog license and I don't want to have kennel inspections. But you could actually look at it the opposite way and know that if I have a license, I'm doing it the right way. If I'm having these kennel inspections, I can utilize that in my breeding program or my advertising of my breeding program as I live in an area where we have kennel inspections. My kennel's inspected. So obviously we pass our kennel inspections all the time. We're sanitary. We're doing things the right way. We have no animal abuse going on because, again, we're inspected all the time. I almost think we as Americans stray away from those guardrails when they could really be beneficial if we just played to them. Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely. So that's a lot to unpack there, but uh, I think the fact of having a license is a privilege and it's a responsibility, but it's also guaranteeing of your rights. So it's like I don't have to be afraid to say if I have puppies, I can put them on, I can advertise them because I'm legal to have them. I'm not hiding out. I'm not trying to be an anonymous source on the internet saying, well, I don't want anyone to know I have dogs because it's okay. I got dogs. I'm legal to do it. I don't have any worries about it. So there's a freedom that comes with that, you know, and as a right and a responsibility. Along with that, I agree to all this stuff, that goes along with that, and just like the rights of gun ownership we were talking about. Yeah, that's a very well protected right. And sometimes at the point of responsibility, someone in our little town 10 miles from here got their Christmas guns. Never really thought about that, and I said, but they were out shooting them, and accidentally, a bullet went 2 blocks too far and picked off someone's grandma holding the baby on their front porch. Randy died. And I mean, I think a little bit like, okay, you can have guns, but you're responsible. Now, if someone probably very nice person got now charged with homicide because they shot grandma Christmas Day. But the part of the reason of having when they are pushing these animal rights restrictions is they're saying, well, if so and so if they have a whole bunch of animals, that's a huge danger and a stress to the community, and they should have to have these animals need to be healthy and have da 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 this and that because it's a danger to the community. As it sits right now, even though I'm in a pretty good state to have, as far as like low legislation, I have to have more I have to have more guardrails. I have more criteria for the safety for my Japanese chin than somebody does who got their Christmas machine gun. Because, and although my chin haven't taken anybody out ever, but still have to agree to have safe spaces, and I have to make sure they're current on the rabies in case they go rogue and start attacking people. So I mean, there's rights go with responsibilities, and I think that when we're starting to package up that, oh, well, these dog breeders, they need to do this and they need to do this, and basically what the AR groups are doing is they want to make it so hard for you to get it. They wanna bury you, like it's gonna be so hard, so not cost effective that they're gonna, like, discourage people, make it impossible for them to get this, and so then all these people that have the dogs are basically doing it on the down low illegally, and they're not documented breeders, so that at any point in time they get caught, they could have the canine equivalent of ICE, and they could, 'cause they're not legal. You're breaking the laws. You're supposed to. You can only have 5 dogs, and you have 7. You're breaking the law. There you go. There's a lot there. You should need to be aware of the laws that are on the books. Try to operate within the laws. The better you can do. If there's a license available, you probably should take it. It offers you a degree of protection. It kind of turns around and say, "Hey, I'm licensed. I've got this and this and this. All of that."
I mean,
But
it's like driving. You can drive without a license, but you go get it and you're
absolutely.
protected. You can now do it, and
You
you're a
can
little
even
more
do it
protected.
badly. Well, you can do it
Yeah.
a little badly. Yeah, you get in a little trouble, but you can run that stop sign. If they catch you, you get a ticket, right?
Well, it's like, not that I want to make this a podcast about guns versus dogs, but like that is extremely interesting when you put it in that perspective to think about is like to breed dogs, you have to have more licensing than to carry a gun. I mean, that's crazy to think about when you put it into that terms. And it's like,
And
wow,
I think those are
okay,
both really important rights. I think that's
right.
super important rights. I'm a gun owner, so I mean, yeah, I get it. I understand. I do find it to be ironic that because my dogs are a potential danger to society,
Yeah.
and that that and but you know what, the same, like, we're talking about the pinch collar for training, the same pinch collar that was needed with that bull mastiff puppy, not needed with the Japanese chin puppy. So where's the common sense? A dog is just not a dog. A gun is not just a gun. There's we kind of have to have a little bit of like, let's look at some common sense here. Where does
Well, and
this
a lot of
exactly
times it's
fall?
not the animal that's the problem. It's the person that has the animal. I mean, and you could go down a thousand roads with that, but I mean, pit bulls,
1,000 rules.
huge. They got a bad rap for a lot of irresponsible people, not necessarily the dogs, but the people that controlled the dogs or raised the dogs. I mean,
I
there's
think, yeah, and you know, of course, you don't want to take that exit for mental illness highway 101. Mental illness involving animals, that's, man, that's bad. You know, I mean, people who are not in their right mind, and now they have a whole bunch of animals. That had some crazy dude up in Oklahoma that, had a couple hundred dogs in this, his like little store, and it was like nuts. He's crazy. He clearly not in his right mind, and so, but that's really not a dog breeder. He's a dog breeder because he's having puppies, but he was clearly checked out of his, faculties, and probably, someone that's probably as extreme a case as someone that's like shooting people off of rooftops with their guns. There's a whole lot of like nice normal people that can have a gun and not shoot anybody, and there's a lot of nice normal people that can have their dog, maybe have a litter of puppies to shoot, and not go ahead and I mean, when you go ahead and you legislate to an extreme, and are really just punishing the people who are doing it right.
well, and that's. I mean, I think that's something that we tend to do just as a society, and is like it's almost like overcorrecting, you know? So it's like one of the perfect examples for that is what my kids are going through right now in high school. And so, smartphones came out years ago and it started benefiting people's lives. You could bank from your phone, you can have access from anywhere, you can talk however you want. And then it gets to a point of like, oh, this is so great. Everybody needs this. It's a tool, it's a beneficial to your life. And then it gets to a point of now where we almost have to overcorrect, and it's like high schools are banning phones from the property to where kids can't
Really,
have watches or phones on school premises. And it's like, so then you look at that and it's like,
I
parents
hadn't
are
heard of
freaking
that.
out. Yeah, oh, it's
Well,
happening all over
that's
the
wild.
place. Yeah.
I would have been so much better student if I'd had a smartphone. I could have done. I would have like gone through. I could have done algebra. I mean,
And that's the
if
thing. That's
my
what that
if I had
that's where
Chat GPT, I could be like Hemingway.
well,
It could
and
be
like
amazing.
the access that you have, it's super crazy because it's like I've literally watched my daughter do it. She can take a picture with her phone of a math problem, and the app will tell her how to solve it and give her the work along the way. But
Wow,
but that's not necessarily. I mean, I would have loved that as an
I'm
awful
loving it.
student.
I'm loving
Yeah,
it right now. I'm loving it right now.
but it also and they're not banning it because of that reason. A lot of what's coming out is because kids aren't paying attention. They too much going on that they're looking at their wrist and their smartwatch and their phones, and they have all the access. So it's like now we almost have to overcorrect what we've allowed. And it's like, nope, just banned. You can't even bring them on school property. Not allowed. You're not allowed to wear a watch. You're not allowed to wear any connected things. And it's like, so that's how we have to handle. We let things get so far out of control. Now have to go and just like it's banned everywhere. You're not allowed to have it. And it's like, well, maybe if we stayed on top of things along the way and started addressing issues along the way instead of well, now it's way out of control, and the kids are in control of the classrooms, and the teachers have zero control. So we need to outlaw this stuff. But I think it goes that way with like pretty much anything that we do. Is just like you don't hear a lot about gun laws unless there's a big
A
issue that
problem,
happens,
right?
right? You don't
Right.
hear a lot about dog stuff
There's a problem.
until something happens and there's 20 dogs found in somebody, a hoarding issue or something like that. And then all of a sudden it's national news and we have to overcorrect and ban all breeding, as like,
Exactly. Because we make this one incident into being like some epidemic problem. And honestly, with the AR groups, it's their business. That
that's how they make
trying
their
to
money is blowing
It's
that up
how they
into a
make
huge
their
issue.
money. Yeah, I mean, and they get some really good perks off of it. They're making money, they're getting prestige, they have control. I mean, there's a lot going on there with that. And like anything else, you have any good thing, you just have to have an enemy, and the enemy would be the dog breeders. You know, Not the irresponsible owners that are dumping dogs or letting dogs. The breeders are easier to find than the irresponsible owners. The irresponsible owners, they're a little more transitory bunch.
They know how to lay low,
They're laying low, man. But the breeders, we got a shingle, we got an address, we got a name. You can target us. So we're gonna on there all the time. So it's like once you go ahead and throw that out there, well then you just like made the most wanted list, that type of thing. You're easy to find.
Well, and there's a lot of heartstrings they can pull in that scenarios. You
Absolutely.
throw dogs in there, and you can paint a heartstring picture and get so many people on board because this poor hoarding
Sure.
situation. I
Sure,
mean,
but you look at those same situations, and if it were just kids standing on the front porch, would those people be near as nutted up? Would they be near as worked up about it? Would they be near as crazy about that? We have a higher criteria and a higher people will get outraged faster for it to be animals than it would be for children or elderly or any other kind of demographic like that. In order for people to get too nutted up over it, it has to be, you know, crazy stuff, but like,
well, I mean,
like the
why doesn't the reverse picture ever get painted, right? So we got these AR groups that are going, they're taking these negative things and they're painting these awful pictures. They're pulling at people's heartstrings, but the opposite side of the coin is, what about the sentimental, like the I'm gonna cry of happiness, the oh sad, look at that, or oh cute, that's great. Breeders have a strong purpose in the aspect of police dogs, service animals. Think about all these military members that can't live
emotional
life
support.
without can't live without their service animal, emotional support animals. I mean, there's so many aspects that breeders bring to the table that nobody talks about because it's just like, well, we don't want to talk about what good these dogs are doing. We want to
No.
classify them in this negative animal abuse situation. And it's like, there's probably more dogs out there every single day passing certification for support dogs than there is animals being abused.
Oh, a gazillion percent. Like whenever I get it's like for a while that we were going to cancel the idea that people would get a puppy at Christmas time. We are going to cancel that. That was going to be canceled. And I've always thought, well, that's the dumbest ass thing I've ever heard. You know, if a family has got 2-3 weeks off from school and they all want to do something together and they want to and the parents are on board. So it could be, and also financially, if you're going to spend the money to get a puppy and everything that goes along with it, why not have that be that? But for a while, that was like poison. People would like put the bumper stickers, puppies are not for Christmas, they're for life, like,
Duh, but you gotta buy buy them at some point of the year, and it's like, I'd rather
you know
people
what?
buy them when they're gonna be home with them for 2
When they're
weeks
going to be
and
home with them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, then
Yeah.
rather than buying them on a weekend in April where it's like, "Oh, I'm buying this puppy on Saturday and everybody's gonna be gone on Monday. Good luck, puppy."
Good luck. Yeah, good luck. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like I don't think that I think that there should never be a surprise gift to someone. The caregiver should never be surprised about that. Because they should know that's coming. Like Jane's kitten that she got, for over sort of Christmas time. Well, I was like, I mean, yeah, it's not a surprise. She knew. She knew exactly. She got all the stuff. She was ready for it. All of that. It shouldn't be a surprise, but it absolutely can be a gift. And I mean, I share those pictures. The first few times I would share those on my stuff, I was like going, well, here comes the hate mail, but like, got to push back a little bit. Like, there's got to be a little bit like, hey, come on, common sense, folks. You know, you can do this. You don't have to buy into the package they're selling. Responsible ownership can happen anytime. Major purchases can happen anytime. You just go, there's not a problem with this. It's a problem with the way how things our cancel culture, how we can get canceled. And if we're not careful, we'll just let our feelings cancel everything about purebred dogs.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um, I think that kinda wraps up my questions. You got any more to add on that? I think we probably did a good job of getting canceled ourselves. Like, this might rub some people the
For
wrong way, you know?
very, very, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, it's possible.
you know what? We just pull the freedom of speech card, like, we can
We
talk about
did.
what we want. It's our podcast, leave us alone.
So fire us.
Yeah, just don't listen. I mean,
There
no,
you go.
actually keep listening. We really appreciate it. We're growing really
And
fast, and
share.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and share it out with your friends, share it with your
But
legislature. I mean, whoever.
we're fighting for their rights. We're,
Yeah.
we're right
We're
fighters for
fighting
you.
the good fight here, pro dog breeding. So, you know, pick your side, I guess. I don't know. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on episode 41. We will be
41.
back next week with another episode. Dale's off to California this weekend to do some judging. What
Palm
groups are you?
Springs.
What do you got?
I got some sporting stuff I'm doing, and I got some toy stuff I'm doing out in beautiful Palm Springs. Super excited, leaving the cold behind and getting to go out there and judge dogs and run in Palm Springs will be a blast.
Awesome. Yeah. So, all right, we will talk to you guys all next week. Have a good rest of your week. Thanks for being a
Happy New Year.
part of the. Yeah. Happy New Year, and we will talk to you guys all soon. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.